On a sunny afternoon in the Santa Clara Valley in the 1960s, a young boy was tinkering with his adoptive father in a garage. His father, Paul Jobs, a skilled mechanic, was showing him how to build a cabinet. "You have to make the back of the cabinet just as beautiful as the front, even if no one will ever see it," Paul said. That boy was Steve Jobs. That lesson on perfection, even in the most hidden places, planted a deep seed in his soul, shaping an obsessive philosophy for the rest of a genius's life. Born on February 24, 1955, Steve Jobs was the result of an unapproved romance between two young college students. He was put up for adoption right from birth. In his youth, Steve was not a well-behaved boy by conventional standards. He was a rebel, easily bored with the rigid education system. He found his passion in tedious electronic components, yet his soul yearned for the distant philosophies of the East. At Reed College, an expensive private school, Steve only lasted 6 months before officially dropping out. But instead of leaving, he chose to drop in on the classes he liked. His decision to wander into a calligraphy class, which seemed useless at the time, turned out to be a fateful moment. 10 years later, when designing the first Macintosh computer, it was those elegant strokes and meticulous spacing between letters from that class that turned the Mac into the first computer with beautiful typography. The real story began when the dreamer Steve Jobs met a mild-mannered technical genius, Steve Wozniak, Woz. They shared a passion for practical jokes and electronic gadgets. Woz was a circuit board wizard who could build a computer out of a pile of cheap parts, but Jobs was the one who saw the future. When Woz created a crude circuit board just to show off to friends at the Homebrew Computer Club, Jobs told him, "Let's sell it." In 1976, Apple Computer was born right in the Jobs family's garage. To raise capital, Jobs sold his beloved Volkswagen microbus, and Woz sold his HP Pocket calculator. The name, Apple, came about simply because Jobs had just returned from an apple orchard, and he wanted his company's name to appear before Atari, where he used to work, in the phone book. They created the Apple I and then the Apple II, a game-changing machine. The Apple II was no longer a tangled mess of wires for techies. It was encased in a sleek plastic shell, ready to use right out of the box. Apple exploded, propelling the two young men from a dilapidated garage onto the cover of Time magazine. At 25, Steve Jobs became a millionaire with a massive fortune. But rapid success also revealed Jobs' dark side. He became arrogant, ruthlessly demanding, and frequently berated his employees. In the early 1980s, IBM, Big Blue, began eyeing the personal computer market. Jobs realized Apple needed a decisive punch. He became obsessed with the graphical user interface, GUI, and the computer mouse after a visit to the Xerox PARC Research Center. He formed the Macintosh development team, hanging a giant pirate flag in the office with the slogan, "It's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy." He wanted his team to be rebels who reshaped the world. In 1984, the Macintosh debuted with a legendary Super Bowl commercial, implying that Apple would smash IBM's tedious monopoly. The Macintosh was a masterpiece of art and technology. But after the initial boom, its sales plummeted disastrously due to a lack of software and slow processing speeds. Disappointment over sales, combined with Jobs' increasingly dictatorial personality, sparked a civil war at Apple. John Sculley, the former CEO of Pepsi, whom Jobs himself had lured to Apple with the famous line, "Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world?" now stood on the opposing side. In a dramatic board meeting in 1985, the board stripped Jobs of all his executive power. At the age of 30, the founder of Apple was fired from his own company. It was a horrifying shock. Jobs felt like his heart had been ripped out. He wandered in aimlessness, thinking his life was over. But as Jobs later concluded, it was awful-tasting medicine, but I guess the patient needed it. Being fired freed him from the pressure of success, bringing him back to the starting line with a beginner's mind. During his years in exile, Steve Jobs did not sit still. He founded Next, a computer company aimed at higher education. Although the Next computer was a commercial failure because it was too expensive, its unparalleled object-oriented operating system became the foundation for a great future. More importantly, in 1986, Jobs bought a computer graphics division from George Lucas for $10 million and renamed it Pixar. At the time, no one believed that people could make animated films using computers. Jobs patiently poured millions of dollars of his own money into Pixar for a decade, nurturing John Lasseter's team simply because he believed in the combination of core technology and the art of storytelling. In 1995, Toy Story hit theaters and shocked the globe. For the first time in history, lifeless 3D models on a computer screen had souls, emotions, and brought tears to millions of viewers. Pixar's success returned Jobs to the status of a billionaire, but more profoundly, it taught him the power of humanistic art when crystallized with technology. While Jobs was reaping success with Pixar, Apple was sinking into a deep crisis. Under the leadership of short-sighted CEOs, Apple produced a myriad of lackluster, chaotic product lines and was on the brink of bankruptcy in 1997. To save itself, Apple acquired Next to get its new operating system and, consequently, brought Steve Jobs back. His return was like a purge and a rebirth. He cut 70% of pointless projects. He simplified the product line to a 4-square matrix, desktops and laptops for consumers and professionals. He launched the Think Different campaign, not to sell computers, but to recommit to Apple's soul, honoring the rebels, the ones who see the world differently. Together with Jonathan Ive, a brilliant designer at Apple, Jobs gave birth to the iMac G3. In a world of dull, grayish-beige computer towers, the iMac arrived with a translucent, bondy blue, rounded, and sexy plastic shell. It was not just a machine, it was a fashion statement. Entering the 21st century, Steve Jobs didn't just want Apple to survive, he wanted Apple to dominate. Starting with the digital hub vision, where the Mac would be the center for managing all digital devices, Jobs led Apple to create successive seismic shifts that broke all the rules of multiple industries. But the most glorious moment, the absolute peak of a creator's life, occurred on the morning of January 9, 2007, on the Macworld stage. Wearing his familiar black turtleneck and Levi's jeans, Jobs stepped out and boldly declared, "Today, we are introducing 3 revolutionary products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device." He repeated those 3 devices over and over until the audience erupted in realization. These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone. The iPhone didn't just reinvent the phone, it opened a new era for humanity, the mobile era. It put the internet right in the palm of your hand. And a few years later, in 2010, the iPad was born, closing Jobs' divine streak of innovation, blurring the lines between a computer and a magical magazine. As the Apple empire reached the height of their power, darkness began to cast a shadow on Jobs' personal life. In 2003, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. During his years battling the severe illness, death did not frighten him. Instead, it became the sharpest motivation driving him to work. In his famous commencement address at Stanford University in 2005, amid students eagerly stepping into life, the gaunt man spoke calmly about death. "Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart." Even in his final days, when his body was failing, Jobs still worked tirelessly to design Apple's new headquarters, Apple Park, a perfect flying saucer-like ring reflecting his ultimate pursuit of perfection. Steve Jobs' life was not a flawless picture. He was hot-tempered, sometimes cold, and a difficult person to have complete personal relationships with. But the world does not honor him for his friendliness. The world honors him because he left a dent in the universe. From an abandoned boy searching for his identity to an arrogant youth in a garage, exiled from his own kingdom, and then returning as a savior to build the most valuable company on the planet, Steve Jobs proved that technology does not have to be dry and cold. His story has ended, but the spirit of that rebel still echoes endlessly in a quote engraved in history: "Stay hungry, stay foolish."